Hello, everyone. I am Drew Blessing, staff support engineer here at GitLab. And today, what I'm doing is I'm going to look at some documentation changes for our high availability and scaling docs. And the issue that I'm working from is in the description for this video. It is GitLab CE issue 44800. And I'll share my screen so we can take a look at that. Okay, so this is the issue we're working from. And what I hope to have as an outcome from this call today is a work in progress merge request with some small amount of changes toward this end goal. But there are a lot more changes that will be necessary. I hope that this will set the framework for those additional changes. So an additional outcome is I hope to create other issues so that either me or others can come along and apply this framework to the rest of our HA docs. So why do we need to do this? What's wrong with the current documentation that we have? Well, currently, the docs don't really guide the administrator through the install process, which components need to be set up first. For instance, we need the PostgreSQL database before we can install the GitLab application server, or GitLab, of course, isn't going to work. There are also other considerations that aren't mentioned in the docs. For instance, the GitLab secrets.json file needs to be synced among all nodes, as well as SSH host keys. How do you handle backups, upgrades? These are things that administrators need to know and understand going into a scaled or highly available GitLab environment. And the final reason is because we'd really like to combine the CE or core high availability documentation with the enterprise premium and ultimate documentation. Right now, we're only showing the enterprise documentation. If I pull that up here, you'll see that all of the links on our doc site default to EE. And of course, for Omnibus, the things that we ship around the highly available database and Redis are only available to Enterprise Premium and Ultimate customers, but core users could, of course, choose to set up their own highly available database. So we want to sort of merge all of those together so that we don't have to maintain two sets of documentation, and that allows all of our users to see, here are my options for core, for starter, for premium, and for ultimate. Okay, so that kind of lays the groundwork for why we need to do this and what we hope to see as outcomes. So let me show a little bit about, of course, these are the documents today. I mentioned that there's really no step-by-step, like do this first, then set up Redis, then the application servers. We do have really good architecture examples, sort of in order from lowest effort all the way up to like fully distributed, everything's HA, no single points of failure. And we want to make sure that we guide the users through every option. So for basic scaling, of course, steps 1, 2, 3, 4, same for fully distributed HA. A couple of things that I've considered before this call is what if we do a single page for every architecture? The pro to that is that users, let's say they want to set up basic scaling. They come to a single page, top to bottom, go through all the steps, and at the end, they're done. But the problem that I found when I started to implement this is that it has some serious maintainability problems. There's lots of repeating because the setup for a single node database contains some of the same steps as and configuration examples as a fully highly available database. So we don't want to repeat ourselves in the documentation because then things will easily become out of date. We make one little change, you need this other configuration value to set up a database now, and we'd have to change it in, let's say, up to half a dozen pages. So we don't want that. So what I'd like to try today is to break it up by component. To a certain extent, this is already how it is today. For instance, if you go to the bottom of this page, there are links to configure the database, to configure Redis, and each component has its own page. But what it's lacking is the differentiation between, like, what if I'm setting GitLab up for scaling? In this case, the database isn't highly available. So how do I set that up with Omnibus? So let's go ahead and jump right in and make some changes. Now our docs pages all have this handy edit this page link at the bottom. So I can go ahead and click that. And one thing I notice immediately is the doc site has some logic built in that says, if this is an enterprise only documentation page, take you to the EE repo. And if there is a CE doc counterpart, then we should edit that page. But this is what I was mentioning about the CE and EE docs have become very different. These docs pages haven't been updated in a really long time. So for now, what I'm going to do is work from the enterprise docs only, with the goal of eventually making this so that we can backport it to CE and it still makes sense. Okay, so we're in the EE, the high availability README page. We'll go ahead and launch the web IDE. Okay. So the first thing I'm sort of envisioning here is under each architecture example, we just start with some installation instructions. I'll use this heading for now. I don't know if that's the best long term, but for instance, we know that we need a database, we need Redis, and we need storage before we even think about installing GitLab. So we might put a link here to Postgres. And then Redis. And then we want to recommend Gitly because that is where we're moving as opposed to NFS. But NFS is certainly still an option, so we should probably link to that as well. And finally, the GitLab application nodes. That's a loose example of what we might do for basic scaling. And then similar to what we have now, I envision like a single page for the database, but we would have headings on that page for each type of architecture. So we would probably have one for scaling. That is simply, how do you set up a single node omnibus server? And then further down the page, there would be a highly available database instruction set that would go through setting up console and rep manager or Patroni, and all of the other things necessary to get that highly available database. The disadvantage, of course, is that users have to link around, but at least it keeps it dry, easily maintainable. So we'll see how that works. What I think would be easiest to start with today, for the purposes of this call and getting that initial work in progress done, is to make some changes to the Redis docs. So let's go ahead and open the Redis page. There are probably some additional changes here. I was looking through these docs earlier today, and there's some information that really is pretty generic to any high availability or scaled infrastructure, such as, consider that your network can still be a single point of failure. So that's information that we could probably move out to like an intro or an overview page rather than having it just on the Redis page. But here we can see that there is high availability with Sentinel. So this is what our users or a GitLab administrator would need for a full high availability setup. The Sentinel allows the failover to occur, zero downtime type of thing, but that's really not necessary for the basic scaling. In basic scaling, we are really looking for multiple front-end application servers with GitLab, and we still have single components for the database and Redis. So what I'm thinking here is let's add a section for a standalone Redis server. And then we can add docs here for how do you configure a standalone Redis node with Omnibus. And then we can link directly to this from this other page. So let's see here. I always forget how to do the relative links here, but let's see, this should work. So we change this to format that should link directly to that header. And that's the idea that I have here. So we would do something similar for the database, for Gitly, for the application nodes. And then as we go down the list here, we can reuse some things. In full scaling, yet again, we still have a single Redis server, a single database server. So we would basically have this same link down here. But when we get to the high availability section where we need that failover, we need Redis Sentinel, then we would link to the heading on the Redis page for high availability. So I'm hopeful that this sort of model can be applied. The other thing that I'm thinking about is, of course, since we want to merge the CE or core documents with the enterprise premium and ultimate ones, what we can do is take advantage of the badges that we have built into the doc site. And if we go to the documentation style guide, we can see how that might work. Okay, so we have these product badges. So certain things like Redis Sentinel are only available in premium and higher, so premium and ultimate. So for that section, we could add this premium badge. And that will alert customers when they see these docs that, oh, I need to make sure I have a premium subscription in order to utilize this feature. But for things like scaled GitLab, that can be done perfectly easily with Omnibus in core. So we'll note that as well. We could put core there so people know that that's possible. One distinction we need to at least keep in the back of our mind, though, is that from the GitLab support perspective, while you can scale GitLab with core, if you're going to contact GitLab support for help, then that support is only available for premium and ultimate. But I don't know that we will reflect that in the badges. The badges are meant to show feature availability, okay? So let's grab this core badge. And we can put it right there. And it looks funny in Markdown here, but once we get this deployed on the doc site, it will have this nice badge. I wonder if I can find an example of that quickly. Let's see about epics. Yeah, so epics is an ultimate feature for self-managed or gold for GitLab.com. So this is what we would have then for standalone Redis. It's going to say core. So anything core or above, or basically all installations of GitLab can take advantage of that for self-managed. But then for the Sentinel, this would say premium. So let's go back and grab that premium tag. And we would add that there. So I'm going to go ahead and commit this and start my work in progress merge request because I think that this is actually enough to illustrate what I'm envisioning here. And so it's a good time to have some more conversations with the team, including the community, and see what everybody thinks. Okay, so let's see, commit message here, changes to HA docs to include different architecture types. Spell architecture types. Let's actually save that issue link for later. We have some rules around what makes a good commit message. And so I think mine is a bit too long here. Let's see if we can make this more succinct. We'll leave that for now. Okay, so we'll create a new branch, and something that we've set up in the GitLab repos around CI is if the branch starts with docs and a dash, then it won't run the full GitLab application test, because if we're only changing docs, that doesn't matter. But it makes sure to run some checks on the documentation itself. So we'll say docs, HA archetypes. Sure, that works. And we'll stage and commit that. Okay, looks like everything is committed. Now let's go back to the repo and we'll create our merge request. This resolves part of 44800, as we mentioned. Of course, the next outcome that I need to make sure we get done after this call is to create some issues to follow up on other pieces. So for instance, this merge request will probably include all of the changes necessary to get the Redis page done, but probably it's too much for this merge request to make the changes to the database pages, the application server pages, and so on. So we can leave that to other merge requests, and hopefully other people will get involved in this as well. Okay, that's not a great description, but I'll come back and update it later before I start the conversation with people. Something that I hope viewers can get out of this video as well is how to contribute to the docs. So anyone can click that edit page at the bottom of the doc site and make the change. And then I mentioned putting docs dash in your branch name, and then open a merge request. And someone from the GitLab team will be happy to review that and work with contributors to make sure that that gets merged. All right, and here we can see our changes. So this is very bare bones, but I'll go back and add some meat to this and again, start that conversation with the team and with the community about whether this is a good format going forward for high availability docs and scaling docs. So hope this was helpful to everyone. Follow that issue 44800 and also this merge request. It is in the enterprise repo merge request 9174. And if you have any opinions, comment. But of course, if you come across this video later and we've already made some changes, everything is always up for discussion. So if you think there can be some further improvements, open an issue, or even just open a merge request with some suggested changes. I'll stop sharing my screen now and real quick say thanks everyone for your time and talk to you later.